We're going to be doing the metric mass lab today. We're going to be walking you through how this is done. So we know that in the metric system we use units like the gram and the centigram and the milligram. And today's lab is all about practicing with those and using some tools like the triple beam balance and the electronic scale. So we're going to be looking with these two today with Mrs. Ward and myself. So step one, we are going to take a piece of double bubble gum, and with this gum you're going to look at it and you're going to estimate and hypothesize. You're going to think about what will happen if I chew this gum. If I take this gum and I chew it for a good long time and I get it all chewed up until it loses all of its flavor, and then I spit it out again, will my gum be bigger than I started? Will it be smaller than I started with, or it will be exactly the same size? And so that's the question we're going to try to answer today. And the first thing you're going to do is think about that with your partners and yourself, and you're going to write down in your on your lab sheet what you think is going to happen. If I chew this for a really, really long time, what do I expect will happen to its mass? So that's our first thing. So today we're going to look at the mass lab where we're going to be using gum. And in this lab, you're going to be looking at a piece of gum that has been not chewed, and you're going to find the mass of that gum. Then you're going to chew it for about 5 minutes or so till it loses all its flavor, and you're going to find the mass of that gum again and see what has happened. The first thing you're going to do here is we're going to state the question. What is it we're looking at? Well, if I weigh the gum before I chew it, and I weigh it after I chew it, and the big question is, what's the mass going to do? Is it going to increase? Is it going to decrease? Why will it do that? So the question here is, when you chew bubble gum, does the bubble gum have more mass because of all your spit and saliva in it, or does it have less mass because it loses taste? And the first thing you're going to do is create what's called a hypothesis. This is a statement in which you are going to say what you think is going to happen. And this is not just a random guess, but it's based upon all of your knowledge about that subject and topic. So based on what you know about gum and chewing and mass, you're going to write down what you think is going to happen using a particular format. And the format typically goes like this. If I chew the gum, and that's our if statement, if I chew the gum, then it will, and now you can put whatever you believe, perhaps it will gain mass because of all my spit, or however you want to put it. And that because is important as well. You want to state why something is going to do something. Now, your hypothesis could be wrong. It could be right. But what matters is that you are doing something that can be proven through experimentation. Okay? So that's our first step, is stating the question of a hypothesis.
So hopefully you put in your hypothesis, your statement as far as when you do chew the bubble gum, is it going to have more mass or is it going to have less mass? So you want to make sure that you've looked at your statement that you put down there and said, here's an example. If I chew my gum, then it will be bigger or it will be more mass because I chewed it. There's saliva in it. There's my spits in it. You want to make sure that you put something along those lines so that you're making a guess. Your guess can't be wrong. You are just deciding right now what you think is going to happen. The next part on your lab sheet says experimental procedure A. You can just go ahead and put an X over that part because we're going to skip that part and go down to experimental procedure B.
All right.
All right, so the next step we're going to be on is experimental procedure B. We are going to estimate the mass of the gum. This is where I use my knowledge of the metric system, and I'm going to stare deep into this piece of gum, and I'm going to ask myself, how much does this gum actually weigh? And what it's going to be is I know for a fact that a Skittle weighs almost exactly 1 gram. So if I know a Skittle weighs almost exactly 1 gram, and I'm looking at my double bubble, I can say to myself, how much does this weigh? And that's what you're going to do. Ask yourself how much it weighs, write down your estimation on the sheet there, and then once everyone in your group has done so, you're going to average the mass of your estimate. And you find the average by adding all of your estimations together and then dividing by the number you added. Our second step is going to be experimental procedure B. We're actually going to skip experimental procedure A for now due to time. So here's where we write down our group member's name. So for example, I will write down Mrs. Ward's name because she was part of our group, and her estimation of the mass. What did she think the gum was going to mass or weigh before she even did anything with it? And as it turns out, Mrs. Ward thought it was going to weigh 3 grams. I also made an estimation about our gum, and I stated I thought the gum was going to weigh 3.5 grams. There we go. If we had multiple members, we could have up to 2 more members, and they may have different masses altogether. What we want to do is find now the average of this, and in order to find the average, we simply add together our 2 numbers together, and then we divide by however many party members there were, and there were 2 here, so in our group. So 3 and 3.5 is 6.5, and when you divide that in half, you get 3.25 grams. That's our average. All right, that's our next part. Now we're going to be moving on to experimental procedure C.
All right, everybody, you should be at experimental procedure C. Now what we're going to do is we're going to actually find the mass of our gum. I'm going to do the electric scale, and Mr. Francina is going to find the mass of his piece of gum on the triple beam balance. It's really important that even though if you're virtually all the time and are not coming in and doing this in class, you still understand what we're doing, because there will be questions on the next assessment and the next quiz or test about these tools. So I'm going to put first my piece of gum wrapper onto my scale, and my electric scale right now, I've turned it on and it says 0. So on my scale it now says 0.25, and that is how much my mass of my wrapper is. Now on the electric scale you can press the T, and that is going to actually subtract the 0.25, so I don't truly have to remember that. And now I'm going to put my piece of gum on and find out what my mass is of my gum and wrapper, or I'm sorry, it's taking off the wrapper. So it will now show me just my 4.7 is my mass of my unchewed piece of gum, because the 0.25 was already taken off.
All right, and if you're using the triple beam balance, you're going to have to do, that's called subtracting the wrapper, is called tearing. And you have to do that in your head. So I'm going to put my wrapper on here, and the triple beam balance lifts up just imperceptibly. You can barely tell that it lifted up, but as it turns out, because Mrs. Ward and I are using the same gum, it turns out that it lifts up about the same, and my wrapper also weighs about 0.25 or so. I now put my gum onto my wrapper, and it goes up even higher, and I'm going to move to find the weight of the mass of my gum here. Upside down is tricky. A tad bit more. Almost there. All right, that'll do. And so right now I'm looking at 4.9 grams, but I have to subtract 0.2 from that, which brings me to 4.7 is the mass of my gum. And that is great, because that's exactly the same kind of mass that Mrs. Ward's gum had. And since we're using the same brand of gum, we would expect the gum to be roughly the same mass. So that helps us understand that both our triple beam balance and our electronic scale are working properly, because we are getting the exact same mass for these items, which is good. That's great. And now we're going to be on to our next portion. Experimental procedure C is probably the largest part of the lab. It's where you're actually doing the lab. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to write down our name. I'm the bubblegum examiner, and so I'm going to write down Mr. Franchina. Here I am. And Mrs. Ward will be in here as well. All right, so here we are. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the mass of my gum. Now, there were two different ways of doing this. One was using an electronic scale. The other one was a triple beam balance, and both are used in different forms. They have different ways of being used. But basically, we're going to take the wrapper off, find the mass of the wrapper, and then we're going to put the gum on the wrapper. And depending on if you're using the triple beam balance, you would subtract the wrapper from the gum. But either way, we want to find the mass of just the gum. Then we write that down. Now, as it turns out, the mass of our gum was 4.7 grams for both of us. Then, now that we have the mass of the unchewed gum, we're going to have to chew the gum to then find the mass of the chewed gum. So go ahead and take your gum and begin to chew it. Okay, take your mouth off first. All right, hold on. Ow. Fire foul. All right, now that we hit, oh, sorry, too soon?
Wait for 2 seconds.
All right, now that we've finished chewing our gum, it is devoid of flavor, you've been chewing it for about 5 minutes or so, we need to spit it back out onto our wrapper. Now, hopefully, you remember the weight of your wrapper. That would help. But if you don't, it's not a big deal. So you're going to put your wrapper on your scale. So for me, it's the triple beam balance. And I'm going to weigh that quickly to make sure its mass hasn't changed, which is unlikely. And there we go. Then I'm going to spit out my gum. And we want to stay as clean as possible. Not a whole lot of spit, right? Just gum. Put it on your wrapper. Don't let it touch the balance, because that's disgusting. And weigh it again, or mass it again, as we say. And I'm sliding my, oh man, there we go. That made a big difference. Okay, just a touch. Oh, it's good. All right. So my gum weighs, it says it weighs 1.9, but the wrapper was 0.2, so it weighs 1.7 grams is how much my gum is weighing. And
mine's weighing 1.68, which if we round that up, it's 1.7 also.
yes,
So we both have the exact same
that
mass.
is awesome. Within 0.02 of a gram. Mine's 1.7, hers is 1.68. That is fantastic. Don't bang the table when you're measuring stuff, though. It messes things up. But that's great. So we can see that we started with 4.7 grams each, and now we're down to between 1.68 and 1.7 grams each. What we want to do now is there a difference between our starting mass of our gum and our final mass of our gum? And on your sheet, you'll circle whether there was a difference. And clearly there's a difference. And then you want to calculate how much that difference actually is. And so we'll look into that in just a minute. So that's good, I guess. Then we're going to chew the gum for 5 minutes or so. And we're going to chew and we're chew and chew and chew and chew until there's no more flavor. And then we were going to find the mass of the gum again. And now when we found the mass of the gum, it turned out to be 1.7 grams. Okay. So the question is there a difference in mass? Did we see a change between these two numbers? And the answer is yes, we most certainly did. Yeah? Now, if we did not get exact numbers like this, we would have to add them all together, like we did before, okay, and then divide by the number of individuals in our group, and find the average. But as it turns out, the average will be the same because our numbers are the same. So it's 4.7 grams, 1.7 grams, it's all the same. And yes, there is a difference between these two numbers. And the question is, how much of a difference? What is the difference like? Well, if I take 4.7 and I subtract 1.7 from that, I get a difference of 3 grams. That's significant. That's a lot more than 1.3 grams. So we really did lose some mass. Now, does it support my hypothesis? Does it agree with what I originally thought was going to happen, what my prediction was? Well, if I go back up to my hypothesis, it says if I chew the gum, then it will gain mass because of all my spit. Oh my goodness, well, I was very wrong, wasn't I? So I will select, no, I'm going to use red here. No, it did not support my hypothesis. I was wrong. Explain your results. The gum is lighter than before, comma, it lost mass. Okay. What do I think happened? Well, how did this mass disappear? Well, it didn't just disappear into thin air. I must have swallowed it. It must have gone down my throat with the gum, and it lost its sweetness as well. So this mass must be sugar. And in fact, when we look at our ingredients list, the ingredients list says there are 3 grams of sugar in the gum. And that exactly matches what we lost right here. So clearly we lost that sugar. Finally, what you're going to do are these conclusions down here, which are basically just a series of word problems and practice problems for you to do. And once you go over all those and finish all those, you can submit this for a grade.